Section 1.2, Galileo's concept of inertia. Galileo Galilei was a 16th century Italian scientist. Galileo had some very different ideas about motion and some very new ways of thinking about the world, new ways of determining if something is true about the world. Galileo was the first scientist to perform experiments to test whether these ideas that people like Aristotle had were actually true. Now, over time, Galileo did a lot of things for science, and we're not going to get into all of those things in this course. There's some more information in a separate video that's attached, but in this case, in terms of motion, Galileo put Aristotle's ideas to the test. As the story goes, Galileo, being an Italian and from Pisa, went to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa with two spherical objects, two balls essentially, of the same size and the same shape but with different masses, one heavier than the other. If Aristotle was right and he released those objects, then the heavier one would hit the ground first. If Galileo was right in what he thought, which was that objects fall at the same rate, no matter what they are, or no matter their mass or how heavy they are. If this was true, then when Galileo dropped the balls, they would hit the ground at the same time. And sure enough, when he dropped these balls from the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, they hit the ground at the same time. And Galileo realized that he was right. Galileo, in this case, used an experiment to determine that the mass of an object has no effect on how fast it falls to the ground. In fact, all objects fall at the same rate. The differences that Aristotle would observe, and that you would observe in general, are due to things like air resistance. Objects of the same shape and size will have the same amount of air resistance on the surface of the Earth, which is the only place that they could test these theories at the time. And so since the air resistance, the shape, and the size were all the same, the only thing that was different was the mass, those two objects fall at exactly the same rate. You can observe this a bunch of different ways, and if you view some of the videos attached in this course, you'll find some more information. The other thing that Galileo showed with his experiment was that you don't have to constantly push or pull on something for it to continue moving. First of all, when Galileo released the balls and they fell to the ground, I mean, you're not touching anything as it's falling. I'm not sure of their entire concept of gravity at the time to recognize that gravity was actually pulling it as it was accelerating. But you don't have to push or pull on something. But it wasn't just that. He realized that if there was no friction, no resistance to motion as something was moving, then it would just continue moving forever at the same speed. It would never slow down or speed up. If you take away something that slows an object down, what's going to keep it from continuing to move? We'll explore these concepts further in this class, but the importance of Galileo and his method of testing his ideas, his method of experimenting and determining if there was a way to show that some of these things were true, has been carried on since that time. Galileo determined that you have to push or pull on something to get something to start moving. But once it's moving, it's going to keep going unless something's done to it to stop it. Galileo determined that an object has some inherent quality that causes it to resist motion. Heavier objects are harder to move than lighter objects. And that resistance to motion, or resistance to changes in motion, he called inertia. So objects have some amount of inertia associated with them. In general, that inertia is based on how much stuff they're made out of, how dense that stuff is, and things like the shape of the object. There are lots of other factors, but the inherent qualities that determine an object's inertia are its shape and its mass and its density, essentially. Because of all these discoveries and all that was done for the progression of science, Galileo is often considered the father of modern science. His thoughts on experiment are used today